after 9/11 happened, that spawned the new atheists, and they were out to hurt religion, clearly.
Right,
so,
right. Yeah, so let's go ahead and that's where I said I wanted to kind of pull that thread with you a bit, because I wrote a book responding to the new atheists back when they were new, and tried to define how this new atheism and its assertiveness and the form of its arguments, particularly making a moral argument against Christianity rather than just some kind of metaphysical, ontological argument. And yet it's not clear to me they had much effect in terms of converting people to atheism. I want to test a theory with you, and that is that their real effect was to mainline certain forms of atheistic thought in the larger culture's toolkit.
Yeah. So a couple points here. The first is the new atheism wouldn't have happened without September 11. They were reacting to that. And so in my original manuscript, I wrote, if September 11 hadn't happened, the new atheist books would have been on sale for 5 cents at the local library within a year. But the 9/11 gave it a kind of an energy that they capitalized upon. What they had to say was historically and in terms of history ideas, pretty misled and pretty shallow. And they got blasted by lots of scholars of religion, people, not just people of faith, but nevertheless, they had an impact at first. It's not that what I argue is it's not that they converted everyone to become atheists like them, but they threw religion into doubt. They took people who were maybe inclined to be skeptical of religion and gave the impression that, oh, wow, there are really solid intellectual reasons not to be religious. So it kind of shifted the needle, so to speak, in a certain direction. It wasn't decisive. And in the book, I say, the new atheists don't deserve that much credit for all this. But they, in combination with the impact of September 11, it kind of polluted. They helped to, the word I use is they helped to pollute religion generally. Of course, there's no such thing as religion generally. There are specific traditions, there are specific faiths, but that's not how Americans think. They think religion. So, they help to pollute it. And so once you're polluted, it's very hard to figure out how to become unpolluted. Another thing I should say, though, is a lot of the post-boomers we interviewed, we came away with the definite impression that there was a change. At first, in the first phase of New Atheists, a lot of people were impressed and sort of followed this. But then they stepped back and thought, wait a minute, this doesn't totally really make sense. And a lot of the New Atheist attitudes and spirits for a lot of Americans came across as just as zealous and fundamentalist as the reason they didn't like religion in the first place. So I think there's been a big backing away. It's not new anymore, but there's sort of a not taking so seriously official atheism or activist atheism.
Yeah, I think functionally, one of the things you point out, I read a autobiography years and years ago in which someone growing up in England said, all their basic pattern of unbelief, they finally had a footnote for it when they read Bertrand Russell. So, in other words, there are people who are looking for an authority. Now you can cite for Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins, et cetera. The other point I tried to make when I dealt with this early on, and what struck me, and you're implying this, I'm going to ask you to direct to it because I get ties to one of your later chapters. I don't think the strongest case that any of these new atheists made was rational in terms of going after the truth claims of Christianity. I think the most frustrated of all of them was Sam Harris in this regard. But where they were most effective was in their moral argument, and that was new. You did not have Bertrand Russell and Anthony Flew and people like that arguing that Christianity was toxic. They just said it's untrue. Now it's toxic, according to the new atheists.
I actually think you're totally right about that. And I was actually using those very words in my head when we were talking earlier. And that is, well, first of all, most Americans don't figure out who they want to be and how they want to live in philosophical terms. I mean, most people are just not intellectuals. They don't have the background. They don't think through the existence of God in this way. That people's lives are formed much more by their relationships, by their experiences, by their moral sensibilities. And again, that's what changed with the zeitgeist. So the new atheists gave people, as I said, it gave people ammunition if they were looking for it. It sort of backed them up to think, well, yeah, I'm right. See, these smart people are against religion, so I should be too. But that was just one among very many factors. So sociologically, again, I mean, a philosopher of religion may get into the fine details of the intellectual questions involved in theology, but sociologically, that's not where most of the action is. People are sorting out their lives in other terms. And so, and especially moral, as you say. So, yeah, when somebody hears a bad story about a pastor who was nasty to a congregant, or they
Right.
experience it, or not to mention, like later in the book, the scandals with the Catholic priests and a lot of others, that moves people more than a Sam Harris argument.
Yeah, I think it's certainly, let me put it this way. I don't think there are that many people I've ever talked to. Now, that's obviously a limited set. I don't talk to everybody. But most of the more liberal, progressive, secular people I talk to, none of them have said to me, look, I was an Orthodox Christian until the pedophilia crisis in the Roman Catholic Church. So I don't think it worked that way. I think it did work as a basic stone rolling down the hill. It certainly added a lot of velocity to the stone, and it also gave people a public reason, maybe even a private satisfying reason to say, I'm done with religion because of this.